sorry, apologies. I'm just giving you more time to say hello to the group. So yeah, let's dive in with a question. So the first question, I'm going to ask you, Kate, to start us off. So what is a DAO and why should we be paying attention to them?
Cool. Yeah, good question to start. So a DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, which has come about since about 2016, based on blockchain technology, with this idea that with the power of blockchain, an organization can be decentralized because it runs on decentralized infrastructure, i.e. a permissionless public blockchain. And that it's decentralized because it's not organized hierarchically around a couple of people, executives or shareholders, and the power is not just around these few people. And it's meant to be an organization because, yeah, it's people coming together to do things. So those three things together mean a DAO. It's basically an online blockchain-based organization where, yeah, the power is not concentrated. It's not meant to be concentrated in the middle. And perhaps we can explore some of those, some critiques of that in this chat.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Just a quick reminder, if you're joined in, to make sure that you're on muted
I do know the photo.
in the background.
Do you know where that is? No, I don't know if it's on the elephant, is it?
Is that Roisin?
No, it's like up
Might need to just mute them.
No.
Just
Yeah,
facilitate
let me just muted. Apologies. Yeah, that's a brilliant start. Thank you, Kate. And you know, it seems really central to what a DAO is the fact that it's an internet-based organization, right? This is what makes it different. So Giulio, yeah, so if DAOs can only exist because of Web3 technology, the newer kind of internet technology, could you just briefly explain to us what that Web3 technology is and how it relates to DAOs?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, the internet is a relatively new technology for us, like maybe less than 3 decades, but it's already having many versions, right? So when it started, it was more like around browsers and universities sharing contents. So you just would go there and, you know, browse through and be happy about it, right? But then came Web 2.0, where around users and social interactions, mobiles came into existence, and you could, you know, submit content. So that was the advancement for Web 2.0. So it was the web of the user in a sense, right? But now the web has become much more intricate, especially with blockchain-based technologies. I call it the web of data, right? The data web. So especially decentralized data. So it's all about data. It's all about AI processing this data with algorithms, and the user is no longer, I mean, the user is the source of this data, but it's actually fueling the internet. And then with blockchain-based technologies, it became possible to create all kinds of currencies and monies over the internet. So because it's possible, because it's blockchain-based technology is immutable and very hack-proof, right? So you can, in the past, it was really hard for you to create like a bank technology, like to allow people to submit money in a safe way, right? But with blockchain, it's almost like anyone can create a new currency around in a few minutes, right? I even had a course last year I was giving around currencies, and one of the classes we created a currency in 15 minutes. So super exciting times, right? And I see the emergence of maybe Web 4.0, a web around humans, but that's the subject for later. But yeah, I believe DAOs are possible because of this blockchain technology that's allowing us to share data in a very secure, immutable way around the web. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That's so interesting. And opening up really to either of you. So I think many people know about blockchain because they've heard of Bitcoin. That might be as far as they go, or they may have some more knowledge of the different cryptocurrencies. But the fact that this technology gives us a new way of organizing ourselves. I mean, is there a separation in a way? Like, can DAOs exist and they can have nothing to do with cryptocurrencies? Can they simply be a way of a community or a group coming together to collaborate?
I guess the answer is potentially, but what's the point? Like we have a lot of communities, systems, practices, methods of organizing together as humans. Yes, there's probably cases where you don't actually need the underlying technology or a key part of that, which is cryptocurrency. But in that case, and this is kind of my mindset now after being involved in a couple of DAOs, is not to put technology first, to put the need. There's often a criticism of DAOs and blockchain, which is that it's a solution looking for a problem. And I've seen this a few times because there was, I mean, going back to the original DAO in 2016, which was basically a venture capitalist fund. It was a way, how can we allocate resources that are coming from the stakeholders? How do we enable them to allocate these resources to the projects that are going to grow the ecosystem? And that was obviously a big success and a big failure because it got hacked. And then so the whole, for me, Web3 wasn't even differentiated as Web3 at that point, I don't think, became this craze of like, oh, we just figured out that Web3 is all about governance. And then it entered this phase of like, it was kind of like a bit of a contradiction. We're going to have less governance. We're going to be able to not have to trust each other because we can trust the blockchain. But that actually didn't happen. And it became, they entered this phase of like governance, DAO technology governance, like fury. And we had Aragon and DAO Stack, who I was working with, Colony, Moloch DAO, all creating their dApps or their applications for how to do governance. And we actually saw the opposite of what this whole movement was about, which was like minimizing bureaucracy and maximizing collaboration, because we don't have to worry about trusting each other and slowly building the relationships and what happens if someone doesn't follow through on what they committed, because that trust layer does it for us. But actually what we saw was just like so much over governance maximization following this trend in about 2017, 2018. And now I think we're at a different phase. Well, at least there's a lot of DAOs out there. Maybe we can talk a bit about that soon. But Julie, I'm keen to hear what you think.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your view, Kate, because, you know, the hard problem, right, is one of the hard problems is resource sharing in a distributed way, right? Because what we know, the way we know how to do is to have a top of the pyramid decide how to share the resources. And then the bottom has to say, okay, we agree, let's do this, right? But how to do this without a centralized power, right? So, and then that's actually, that's the hard problem for humanity, right? In a sense, because this is what you're facing right now. And then governance is all about this, because if you don't have clear agreements, right, then it gets very hard and you can get into a lot of conflicts very easy, right? So I definitely agree. And another important aspect is how to have these clear agreements and be able to change them. So I realized that in the beginning, DAOs were more like, okay, a bunch of investors go there and buy and put some money inside, and then they get tokens, right? Like points for doing that. And then with these points, they also get votes. So they can vote on how to allocate that resources, right? But then the other important aspect of a DAO is to actually solidify the agreements, right? So it became actually very important for the shareholders, in a sense, or the token holders, to be able to vote on agreements, and then it became very, very central, and that human part of creating agreements together became the center of maybe of the DAOs. So that's very interesting to see emerging from the movement, right?
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. So we've got some great questions coming through, and I want to get going on those to give them as much time as we can. Ben, your top question, if I unmute you, do you want to ask it yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I just bought a new mic. I don't know if it was working. Yeah, it was as much as a provocative question as anything. I don't necessarily hold a view on this. It was just, I think if a system that you create is completely decentralized, I wonder what challenges there will then be around even sort of leading people towards the right kind of work, and also just motivating people as well when everyone has an equal stake potentially in the work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess it's this is a good question about what is a DAO in many regards, because there's like this one strand of thinking that DAOs will replace organizations like companies, right? And that the form of a DAO will be like, it will kind of displace this old format of like a hierarchical company where it's all about creating a product or a service, and like in terms of being the most efficient possible and getting the best bottom line. And I think that is potentially the case, but I think first that the shape of organizations will change, and that more networked organizations will be the norm before they turn into DAOs. And that's the case where DAOs could actually be useful. Because currently I don't think, and I think lots of people thought this, we can just like put in the current format into this DAO structure, and it's like, there's really no point. So I think organizations will become much more networked and self-organizing, and that in itself is a whole, a mindset shift, or a shift in how we're used to doing things as humans, which to do that, you have to undergo a lot of behavior change. And yeah, I think a key thing about DAOs, the need for DAOs is where you do have very large networks or groups of people. So DAOs for me don't need to exist unless they're at scale, unless you actually have an environment where you don't know the people, you can't know them, they're on the other side of the world, perhaps they want to be anonymous. You can't really build trust with them. So in that scenario, yeah, I think I've lost the thread of your question, but there is a lot of work still that needs to be done on how we ensure that the coordination is the best it can be.
Maybe I can give an example, a living example, because the company that I work for, the company organization, it's not even a company, right? Building Seeds is a DAO, is a sort of DAO. We actually call it differently. We call it Decentralized Human Organization, right? So we added a human or holonic organization also. It's another way to call it. So and we are not that many, right? We are around 60 people currently, even though, yeah, we are shared, we are with all around the world. So I'm in Brazil, and there are, actually, I think I'm maybe the only Brazilian currently, but maybe there are more because it's growing every day. So yeah. So it's how do you motivate people around when we have, I think the question you had was how do you keep people motivated when you have different equal shares, so everyone is a shareholder, so no one is kind of going to do anything. So one of the solutions that we actually came up with is to have roles, in the DAO. So that's the major, I think, maybe major difference between our DAO and other DAOs. I don't know. Maybe there are some other DAOs. I think Colony also has the kind of circles and roles or skills kind of possibilities. I believe there are a couple of DAOs already moving towards this direction. So we have roles, and these roles, they're not like jobs, you know, or like, what's your job? So the role is, how do you show up? How do you want to work, right? So, and then you get a compensation based on your work. That's a recurrent compensation. And then it's a way to see what are you doing, right? So where are you working? So you're probably working within a circle. So in my view, I think DAOs are a perfect match for the teal organizations, right? From Frederic Laloux's book, Reinventing Organizations. So the teal kind of consciousness for organization is the one that has self-management, integrality, and also purpose-driven work, right? So we believe that it's much easier to have this kind of autonomy in such a space, right? Because you don't need a boss. We say we really don't have a boss on Hive, even though we have power distribution, and it's really, really visible because you see who has more voice. It's like a token. It's a number. You can check the blockchain and see, oh, this person here has been here the longest, so they probably have more voice. But then the voice also dissolves in time. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting framework for TIO organizations. So that's what I wanted to share.
Yeah, I just want to give you a bullet pointed answer rather than going off on a tangent. But I guess the obvious answer is, how do you ensure motivation? Someone deep from crypto land would say, well, skin in the game. If you have a lot invested, if you have tokens, then you're going to behave according to Hayekian rational economics, which is that you will do X, Y, and Z to ensure that these tokens grow in value, which, I don't know. I would also add to that doesn't always happen. And that for me, ensuring motivation in some of these decentralized networks or DAOs is to ensure there's a clear contribution scaffold. So like if you're contributing, and whether that's with economic resource or just volunteering or whatever you're doing, that the return for your contribution is not necessarily just the token goes up, but that you're seen and heard and appreciated, and your contribution is valued in many ways. And some people have designed, I think, which are too technological personally, other ways to recognize that, which is like a reputation system. Oh, I'm going to give you some rep because I saw that you were doing this thing. So yeah, there's quite a few possibilities there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And thanks for a really great question, Ben. Really appreciate that. And yeah, jumping back into, we've got JV, will you come and let me find you, and you come and ask your question. Are you here? Yeah, please ask your question to the panel.
Yeah, cool. I'm guessing you've both been on somewhat of a journey with DAOs, and I'm just curious, like, how's your thinking changed in the last 12 months, maybe even 6 months? Like, what's new, what's emerging, what are you noticing, what's surprising you?
Julia, do you want to go first? Hi, Josh.
Yeah, so I have been also exploring DAOs for some time. I believe the most changes right now, if we could talk about a second generation of DAOs, are more related to what I said, more related to how to create agreements properly, right? So, and because that's the main source of tension on most DAOs right now. So some of them are kind of bursting and collapsing and trying to fork and create different projects. And so how to create these agreements in a very in a way that is not, because we say one way to create agreements is consensus, right? And blockchain is all about consensus, but consensus is not always the best option for creating agreements among humans, right? So we there is also consent for those that studied sociocracy and holacracy. So consent is very different from consensus, right? So you don't have to listen to everyone's opinion and integrate everyone's voices to create a very beautiful one view that is fits for everyone. So actually you can, someone owning the problem, they will propose something, and then if no one else has an objection, a clear objection on why this is harmful for the organization, then the proposal goes forward. So you don't have to have a consensus on it. So I think that's the greatest challenges. That's the greatest challenge for most DAOs right now. And because initially I believe they were formed around resource sharing and reputation sharing, right? So how do you recognize people, and how do you initially you just go there and propose a project to spend some budget, some resources, and then you got the resources and you could do it, and you like kind of, you could pretend you would do it and then get the resources and run away. It was very common, and you got the money and there was no way to actually verify that you did what you would do, right? So some DAOs started to add reputation systems or tracking systems to allow you to track the projects, and that I believe are the biggest challenges: how to give transparency over what's going on with the resources and how to create properly agreements, right? So yeah, that's it, what I see.
Yeah, nice one, Julia. The last 12 months, it's a good question. I guess I still hold this hope that, I mean, the purpose of DAOs and, a lot of network technology and peer-to-peer technology has been inspired by the possibilities that these technologies might do away with this need for this hierarchical centralized form of governance and really enable more spreading of horizontal self-organizing all around the world. And I think we're really not there yet at all. Like, it's still the very early days, but I still really hold that hope, but I've become a bit critical, I guess, like than I was at least 2 years ago, when I was right in the middle of like the DAO stack and working in a DAO and being like, okay. But even in that time, it really felt like we were doing quite similar things to what we were doing in Inspiral, which is like, how do we, as Julio says, like deal with like seemingly incompatible differences? But I guess and so a lot of the methods we were using were the same, like talking to people, using trust, praising people and thanking them for their contribution. But I guess my key point on this question is that in the last year, I've written an academic paper. It's called the Dysensus Protocol. And it was basically about what are the limits to automating governance in online communities. And through that, I've done a lot of research with the key author of it, J.A. Clara Breck, who's an academic, around what Decentralised means. And a Decentralised, unlike consensus or consent or any of these other things, is the emergence of really incompatible differences. And I mean, basically the Decentralised Protocol in DAOs or in blockchain is to fork. And what that means, that's the only available one. And then that means you start a new thing, you start a new community. And yeah, that can be seen as really good, like, okay, there are incompatible differences, that's fine. I'm going to go start my own thing over here. Or like, I just don't agree with what you're doing in this DAO. I'm going to fork, I'm going to start a new one. We've seen a bunch of that last year with, quite in DeFi, especially with Uniswap, SushiSwap, which is very interesting. But from the more communitarian perspective, I think it's quite like, it's a bit scary because for me, Decentralised is like a fundamental part of how we organize as human beings. If there is no room for Decentralised ever, because Decentralised primarily means that you just stop, you break completely, and you start a new group, there is never any room for becoming together in a group. There's never any room for like, okay, we like almost, you know, this is an extreme thing to say, but revolution or revolutionary organizing of a whole different way of organizing society. Because yeah, a key kind of anthropological, or I don't know if anthropological, a key part of governance in DAOs is the Dysensus Protocol, which is to fork. And so we never have this opportunity to accommodate at all differences, which actually do help us build better communities, better societies, right? So the key theorist that we use in this work is, there's two. One is Chantal Mouffe, and for her, basically she says, Dysensus is nothing less than a precondition for a free society. So that's, yeah, my thinking has become very philosophical on DAOs in the last 12 months.
If I can add to that quickly, I really love this point of view, and actually I like to see this more like in an organic way, right? Like cells splitting and maybe sharing the same DNA in a sense, because the DNA is actually the code for the organization, right? How do you make decisions? What kind of possibilities you have? So we actually went through this on Haifa. Recently, we spawned a new DHO from our own DHO. So, and it was actually a very gentle thing that happened, and it was not around like a quarrel or something. It was like a different purpose emerging, right? So, and then this fork was actually very nice to see, and we documented it very well in a wiki. So they are using the same tools that we use, but they have very different purpose, and they have a very different rhythm, very different people and power structure. So it doesn't have to be, you know, a bad thing to split. Actually, it's great because you can tackle more wider purposes, wider activities at the same time. So it's a great recognition that we are bigger than we thought we were. So we have to split in order to grow, right? So especially this happens when there is abundance of resources. So you can, you know, share resources, and the cells can reproduce only when there's enough food around, right? So it's very beautiful to see this happening. And I think it's a natural thing for these organisms, this new kind of organ. And the other thing I wanted to say is that Haifa, for one, is as we say, it's holonic. We kind of see DAOs within DAOs. So we are kind of starting to see that even the circles within the organism, they can behave like mini DAOs in a sense. So and that kind of fractal nature is very powerful for organizing human beings. So maybe that's where we are going. I don't know.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. JV, was there anything you wanted to like ask from that, or does that sort of cover?
Nope, I'm happy.
Cool. Brilliant. Thanks for great question. And then just jumping back into the Slido, like there's nothing else they've got tons of questions. So I'm just going to pick some because there's not a huge amount of upvoting going on. But yeah, what kind of training do you provide for both the technical aspects and the collaborative aspects of the DAOs or DHO in your case, Julie, that you're members of? So as new people arrive, like what kind of support? Do they need a lot of support? What can anyone join a DAO?
So yeah, since you asked my name, and on Haifa, it's kind of hard for new participants because it's a new way to interact with currencies, and if the people don't know about blockchain or tokens or swapping, you know, it can get tricky. And the onboarding is actually, or I think that's where we are worse right now. So there are a bunch of documents and a bunch of resources, and there are many ways actually to join. And usually you start talking to maybe a circle, what we call them lamplighters. Lamplighter is the person that's holding the purpose for that circle. And then you join some meetings and you start to realize what's going on. And when you have to handle the tech, it's actually tricky sometimes. And of course, there's that issue. If you lose your password, you're kind of dead. So you have to start over. So you never want to lose your password, because there is no central help desk where you can go and say, okay, I lost my password. Sorry, this is a decentralized application. There is no centralized help desk. So and it's challenging sometimes, so we need a lot of support and talking people through the steps. So yeah, I think that's one of the greatest challenges.
Yeah, quickly, where I'm working right now, which is in quite at the heart of decentralized finance, or DeFi, there's not a lot of training. Because it is it's early adopters that are finding their way there, with Centrifuge, which is a company I work with. And so it's kind of like, yeah, the pioneers in a way are expected, like if you're playing here, you know the game, which is a bit intense actually, because it's not always true. So my job, I guess, is in any community builder, community weaver, ecosystem person, is to be like, okay, let's try to have a place to ask any questions, to create an atmosphere where it's fine if you don't know. And yeah, it's the mindset is still like, okay, you've got to sort your own passwords out. You've got to understand some of the basics, like password protection, how things, you know, using Etherscan, all that stuff. And it's very complicated and very complex. So that's an example of like extreme DAO land, and we're not even a DAO yet. And then another community I'm working with, where it's the exact opposite. So it's a very small group. We might not become a DAO. It is a blockchain-based community. It's called C3. It's just in a very early stage. And basically, we've got one working group with 2 stewards, so using a lot of Inspiral language here, who are focused on learning and onboarding. And their job for 6 months is to figure out in a group of 5 what is going to be needed to bring in new members. And we're primarily building this for young artists, to understand what's needed to do some basic training in what is blockchain, how do you do crypto key management. Also, how do we self-organize in a group? What is the personal development you need to do as an individual in order to be able to thrive in decentralized systems? Because it's not like suddenly you're in this wide open space with no one telling you what to do. It's very unclear. It's always very emergent. It's not always very natural or comfortable for people, because we're raised in hierarchical systems. So it can be very, and I see this with my work with self-organizing companies as well, which I've done a lot of consulting with. How does a company become more horizontal? It's a big learning curve for people, and we can't expect them to just be like, great, I was born to do this. I'm going to code, I'm going to make this great new integration, and I'm going to ask for the money, and I'm going to put up a proposal, and everyone's going to support me because I'm amazing. It doesn't really happen that way. So I think a lot of training and onboarding is really, really necessary, especially if, you know, not just DAOs, but more horizontal self-organizing systems are going to become more of a norm in society.
That's so interesting, because like one thing I've been thinking a lot about myself is about inclusivity, right? And how do we make, you know, how could we make a DAO, for example, more inviting, or not more inviting, but yeah, there seems to be quite a lot of technological barriers to a DAO. and coming back to kind of the framing of this conversation, which was about like dehumanizing collaboration, or does it help support it? One of the challenges I can see as well, as you say, there's such a kind of amount of self-learning or training needed, or even technological. You've got to have access to the internet, you've got to understand certain aspects of it. Whereas, you know, like a group of people in a village can literally just get themselves together in a town hall and start collaborating. But yeah, I'd just love to hear your sort of views on that.
Is the question, is this inaccessible and therefore dehumanizing?
I guess, do you think, you know, as people in DAOs, is that something that the conversations are happening around kind of, I guess, are the conversations having about inclusivity on a, you know, how do potentially we make DAOs available to people that don't have the kind of technological education, or even like, yeah, you have to have an internet to join a DAO. So I guess that's just those questions. Are they being asked?
Yeah, I have some answers for that. On seeds, we see this as a super important value to have inclusivity, to accessibility. So we are creating I mean, the first part that you get in contact with is called the wallet, right? The wallet is where you store your keys and also your tokens, your funds, right? So it's your first point of contact with the blockchain. And we have our own wallet. Actually, we have two apps for wallets, for seed wallets. We have the Seeds Passport and the Seeds Light Wallet. That's a lightweight version of the wallet, just made for now. It's made for quick transactions and doing like purchases or sharing. And the passport is actually more used for voting and participating on governance. So it's where citizens, because we have citizens, we have levels of participation, right? So if you are a citizen, you can vote, and then you have the passport as the tool for that. And the light wallet is just for anyone that's a merchant or a trader. So it's we see mobile phones are very common, broad, but even if you are talking about rural villages and places without access to technology, we are crafting like a band, you know, that you can wear, and that has a kind of a QR code on it that you can hide if you want. And that QR code is your transaction key, in a sense. And you can like scan the QR code and say, I want to buy this. And then, oh, how much do you have on your account? You just scan the code and say, oh, you have 100. Oh, I want to spend 50. Okay, scan it again. And then you confirm on the screen. And then you're good to go. So we see this technology as very accessible and easy to use for rural communities. And it could be an entry point. So for people that don't want to download the wallet or doesn't have, then in this case, only the merchants need to have a cell phone to scan the QR codes. And of course, if you are a merchant, then you can invest a little bit more. And even though this is a requirement, it's less of a requirement if you have a village of many people. Having one phone or one computer is not so hard to find. So we are really thinking about this, and we really take it seriously, and that's definitely important for getting broad, right, and wide.
I love that. Thank you. Kate, do you have anything to add?
I guess at a high level, I was writing a report for the European Commission a few months ago on blockchain and DLT for social and public good. And it's not specifically about DAOs, but one of the main critiques still, and I'm glad Julio and Haifa DAO are doing so much on it, is that it's very inaccessible, most of this technology. But there's just this realization for many people in Web3 that the base layer, layer 1 and layer 2, it's just still at a very early stage. Right, my windows are banging. And that it will come, the accessibility, the destination is that, you use the blockchain and you don't know it's there, that you're using this DAO app where it's like, hey, I want to do this project with 1,000 people. We need to raise funds. We need to allocate the money in a way that enables people to carry out the mission. Let's say it's a beach cleanup mission. The people from all around the country, you don't really necessarily know them. You don't necessarily need to be in an ongoing community with them. You can use this app. DAOstack are trying to build this, actually. It's called Common. And it's like, we can raise funds. We can govern how that is spent. We can actually coordinate very, very easily. And yeah, okay, there's some blockchain powering this, but I don't need to know about that. It's just like, most people don't really know how the internet works. But we use it every day. That's like the destination point for this, but I think it's still quite a long way away.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Early days, but that's where we're heading. I love that. Brilliant. So I'm going to bring in the next question that's been upvoted is Xavier. So I'm going to add you to the spotlight here. If you'd like to ask Kate and Julia your question.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was wondering, is there any real world examples out there that are already operating as DAOs? Because the only thing I've seen so far were basically crypto communities themselves that are using that. And then kind of related to that is because I've been following the Aragon project that you mentioned before, but same here, actually not sure who is really beyond some experiments here and there, who is really in the real world using it. Or is it just still too early?
I mean, I love this. I love the real world question. Because it's a bit of a catch-22 that if you're using a DAO currently, you are using crypto, and therefore you're no longer in the real world, I guess, according to your definition. I don't know of many, to be honest. All of the DAOs that I know are within, I guess an interesting definition is that they're still building the infrastructure. DAOs, a lot of DAOs that I see are still their purpose is to build the Web3 infrastructure. And that goes for Moloch DAO, which is a very interesting DAO, funded by some of the wealthiest people in Web3. And the key killer feature, they call it there, is the rage exit. So that if you don't agree with, so you propose something, it goes ahead. And if you don't agree with where the money was allocated to, then you rage quit. And the rest of the DAO have to cover, and you take your money with you as you rage quit, and the rest of the DAO needs to cover what you took out, which is meant to be a way to try to have good governance. So you don't want others to rage quit, so that you will not propose something that will get them to rage quit. But that's an extremely crypto bound solution and not a real world at all. So yeah, I don't know, maybe Julia knows.
Yeah, there are not so many yet, for sure. What I kind of know about are more finance or crypto finance related companies like MakerDAO, and I was doing even a Google here to see if I could find other projects, but the one I know is yeah. So actually, Haifa is maybe, well, even though it's a crypto project, in a sense, we are kind of talking about creating solutions for the ecosystem regeneration. So, and we do have a token, so we are a crypto company, but the aim of the project is not just creating a token and getting rich. We actually want to. There is a lot of purpose there, and we want to kickstart DAOs for villages and for organizations around seeds, and we want to kind of use this DHO tool that we are building as a basis for a village to organize, or maybe for an organization. The tool is very usable already. I mean, with all the quirks, but we really hope it to become more accessible, and so any company could use this to get clarity and transparency over resources and decision making. So yeah, I think that's
one that popped into my mind as you were talking, Julia, is Cura DAO, which is the DAO experiment on the island of Curacao, which was meant, it was like, okay, we're going to fund this. Different organizations funded the DAO, and it was an experiment to see what would happen if the economy of the island and the monetary supply went down. I think it's still running as an experiment, but some of their learnings, they wrote a report, which was that sometimes we didn't need a DAO was one of the main outcomes, and that it was very hard to onboard people. So yeah, and one of the organizations that I work with, Centrifuge, is definitely not, I wouldn't describe it as everyday people that are using the technology, but it's like the point is to turn real world assets into liquidity enabled by DeFi, which is, yeah, we're seeing, you know, invoices that are owed to Spotify artists, or people putting mortgages into making them into NFTs and getting liquidity from DeFi. So that is quite a interesting example, I think. It's not a DAO, but yeah.
That's brilliant. Thank you both. And I popped in the chats like just a few that I've been coming across that, while, as you say, you can't separate them because they're based on Web3 technology, and Common Stack is looking to work around how you might incentivize around public goods. Vita DAO are looking, kind of exploring how you might disrupt the pharmaceutical industry. So I think there's lots of really interesting projects that are happening that have a real world intention, as opposed to just staying within the community. Yeah, again, excellent questions. Thank you so much, Xavier. Appreciate that. Was there anything else that you wanted to add to your question?
No, I mean, thank you so much for those responses. Like, I keep wondering, like, to me, like a big part of the challenges for generation is to create more resilient local communities. And as Julio mentioned at the beginning, like now we can create a currency in 15 minutes. And yet somehow I still haven't seen a local currency enabled by crypto today, right? All the local currencies are pegged to the euro, the dollar, or whatever local currency of the country. So there's so much potential there, but I'm still looking for the, yeah, I don't know what's missing. What do you think is missing?
There's actually just one other interesting project that launched a month ago called Humanity DAO, with its own token, which is the UBI token, and it's going.
Yeah, Senti, yeah, proof of humanity.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly, proof of humanity. That's but the question is, what's going wrong? I think it's just where the technology is at. Like, it's still, like, if you really look at you know, what it takes sometimes to get an address, in terms of, like, you know, you have to use a signer app, you have to have another device that holds the password that you never turn on, you never connect to Wi-Fi again, you need to follow these like very intense instructions. It's just too far away from what people know is like normal, which is that you plug in your password, which is, you know, your cat's name with a couple of letters, and then you're good to go. So I think it's the capacity of the technology and how it's still coming along. And I think it is getting a lot better. And also the fact that there's a problem that Web3 builders are building for themselves first, and that's where the incentives are currently. And also the incentives are very strongly in DeFi. Like Julio mentioned MakerDAO, which is a token worth, I don't know, $4,000. And it was, you know, the big vision was about that, like money that serves humanity. But the people that are governing that are also very much inspired by the value of the token going up. So I think it's like there's a fundamental critique that I have, which is like, we can't, unless we have a very critical view in Web3 and what we're designing, we're just going to design these systems that prioritize speculation without prioritizing like the real work that needs to be done.
Thank you. So listen, I'm going to just, but sorry, Julia, because we're just coming to the end of our time. So yeah, Xavier, thank you so much for that question. That was great. Yeah, so we've just got a couple of minutes left, and I just want to close it. Really, just Kate and Julia, if you could just share whatever you would like the people that leave some people here that may have never heard of a DAO before, that maybe never heard of Web3, that still feel like very uncertain, like how might this kind of relate to their lives, or what would you like them to know as they head out the session?
So I was very inspired by what Kate brought now about the change of perspective, right? Instead of building speculative currencies, we are moving away from that, trying to create currencies that real people can use. And as we do that, we are creating maybe DAOs that real people can use the same way. They are not just benefiting the elite, the crypto elite that knows how to use that, and they are, playing with their toys and to get richer. So we are kind of, I believe DAOs could really potentially become a technology to escalate human collaboration, to the planetary scale. So I really believe this, and this also has to do with escalating how we handle finance around the planet. Instead of using a pyramid scheme, we try to use a circular economies and economies that take into account the whole ecosystem and all the people. So DAOs can make it, but if we change the mentality behind it. So that's when I thank you so much for being here. Super grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
Kate?
Great question, Anna-Marie, and very nice panel. Thank you. And I think, yeah, I've been a bit like, I'm always the critic, even when I'm in the system, but I do think that all of the people, many of the people in this call who are, community stalwarts, people that have been in community for so long and know why we do this and can see the potential for a better world where the forms of governance and how we organize are different. Like, we need you to get involved in DAOs and Web3 and bring your perspectives and bring your experience, because we don't want these crypto bros trying to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of this work's already being done. And yeah, especially when we talk about DAOs being fractal and actually they're just small communities, like we need to ensure, like, get in there and have a good influence and bring in the questions around inclusion and diversity and accessibility, and yeah, get involved and bring all the experience that you have and try to shift this fight, I guess it is, in a way that means it serves more people rather than, the crypto elite.
Amazing. Thank you so much. What an ending. And thank you both. It's been really incredible. Thank you everyone for joining and bringing your questions. I'll end the recording now. Let's make that